We are in this series called Together, and we are in the middle portion of Together as Many. We all have various gifts and talents and skills and abilities and interests and all the things. And God has called all of us here, and He's placed you here, and He's brought you here so that we can accomplish the mission and the task that He has called us to do. In the middle of all of that, today we're going to look at the church at Rome. And we looked at Romans 12 last week. Today we'll be over in Romans 15, and I'll get there in a second. But the reason why it's so important is because in the middle of Together as Many, it's easy for us, all of us, to become very interested in the things that we want. And it's easy for us sometimes to create divisions that are unnecessary to create. And this is what happened at the church at Rome. I ran across this video clip that I thought kind of summed up some of the things that were going on. And so I want you to watch this commercial. Some of you may really not identify with it, and some of you may go, yeah, I remember that. But let's watch this video clip together.
Have it your way, have it your way, have it your way at Burger King.
May I help you, sir?
2 Whoppers, 2 Whopper Juniors, and 4 Coca-Cola. And would I have to wait long if you made 1 Whopper with no pickle and no lettuce?
No, sir. Hold the pickle, hold the lettuce. Special orders don't upset us. All we ask is that you let us serve it your way.
Oh, well, in that case, could I have the other Whopper with extra ketchup?
Sure. We can serve your rolled beef Whopper fresh with everything on topper. Any way you think is proper, have it your way.
Now, that's the way to do things. Our way.
Have it your way, have it your way at Burger King. At Burger King.
How many of you remember that commercial? Yeah. Not to put too fine a point on it, but I was only 4 when that came out. So just going to put that out there. So, that came out in 1974. And you know who it was targeting? It was targeting the parents of at that time, that you can get things your particular way. And the thing is that the parents in 1974 are what, generationally speaking, is who we might call the boomers today. And the boomers they came out in that time frame, and marketing really began to shift and create this situation of everything your way. We look at that commercial and we kind of laugh at it because, it's like, look at the hair. But outside of that, the idea of having your way, we get that. That's every day now, isn't it? Everywhere you go, it's like special order, special order, special order, special order. And in fact, if you go to a place that won't special order and won't, let me just ask this. When you go to a place to eat today and you ask to substitute something and they want to upcharge you for that, how many of you get frustrated over that? Why? Because we wanted our way, right? We wanted our way. And that cycle of advertising just expanded, and it's become a cultural phenomenon. It's a cultural reality that we live in a time right now where everything is our way, and we've grown accustomed to having everything our way. And that's how we live today. It's our way, whether it's the way I want my sandwich or the specifics of the car that you want to special order. Who just wants one right off the lot? You want to special order it, right? You want all the things that you want, or your house. How many of you are just going to buy a house that doesn't have the things that you want? You're going to search and find, and if you're going to build a house, you're going to build a house that is just the way you want it. If the architect came up and say, "Here's your house," you're going to be like, "Yeah, no. That's not my way. I don't want it that way." Well, this is the way we're going to build it. So we have grown accustomed to having things our way. And it comes into play because we have 5 generations living among us, and 5 generations that worship together or have the opportunity to worship together. And each generation has its own needs, its own wants, its own thoughts on politics or the world or the social order or theology or Christianity or church work in general. All 5 generations thinking differently. And it creates some complications at times because many times every one of us, whether it's the elders, the boomers, the Gen X, the millennial, the Gen Z, we all sometimes use the same concept. I want it my way. And it's all of us because we've all been trained and raised and marketed to so that we all want it our way. And when we don't have that, it becomes complicated and we get frustrated. No matter who we are, no matter where we are and what we're doing, we can get frustrated with that because we are used to being catered to. And so when we come together in church, that can raise its own issues like it does everywhere else. It can raise its issues because every generation and every one of us like things a certain way and we want things a certain way. And it didn't escape the New Testament church either. They were dealing with this too. But this is why it's so very important that we come together as many to discuss the things of the future. It's so important that we come together so that we can move forward well together, coming together, realizing that there's a lot more that we agree on than we disagree on. It's just that we tend to focus on the things that we disagree on rather than the things that we focus, the primary needs. I would venture a guess, and I have some research to back it up, that the things that we agree on, they're the primary things. We agree on the big ticket issues. We agree in the sovereignty of God. We agree in Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, the life. We agree that Jesus lived a real life. He died a real death for the sins that we committed. He was buried and he rose again on the 3rd day. And that if we put our faith and trust in what he did and choose to receive God's forgiveness and become a follower of Jesus, our sins are erased and heaven is our home to look forward to. We agree on that, right? These are the things, and we agree and we can rally together and we come together, but the things that we disagree on are not the primary things. We disagree on some stuff, and that's humanity, that's reality. I mean, the New Testament church didn't escape these issues either, and we're going to dive into that in just a second. But because of that, this is why it's so important we come together around the things that matter. The gospel of Jesus Christ matters. And we have to come around the gospel, and we come around that together. The Great Commission to go and make disciples, and I'll unpack that a little bit more this morning. It's incredibly important that we come together on the things that we believe, we understand that, we agree on it, we believe it. But sometimes the things that aren't as critically important that we sometimes focus on, that's what blows up, and that's what causes us to have kinds of issues. Whether it's times and schedules or programs or furniture or colors or things of this. These things divide people when that's not the primary important thing. That's not the important thing. We agree on the gospel. We agree on disciple making. We agree on these things. And we need to make sure that that gets the lion's share of our focus and attention. It's not that the secondary issues are unimportant, because they can be important. But these are things that usually cause us to divide when unnecessarily so. When we need to remind ourselves, okay, we believe in God, in Jesus, and we believe in the Holy Spirit, and we believe that He died and He was resurrected. These are the things that we believe in. Let's make sure that we keep our joy at a higher level at that moment and not let the lesser, secondary, tertiary things cause us to lose joy and lose fellowship when that's only the devil's drift in our own lives. So we have to be focused on the primary things that of greatest importance. And so when we come down to this passage and we begin to look at the things that they're dealing with. They're dealing with maturity issues. They're dealing with disagreements. They're dealing with racial issues. They're dealing with socioeconomic issues. They're dealing with the old guard and the new guard issues. They're dealing with all of these things. And so we have to focus on the important things. We need to evaluate the secondary and tertiary or third string issues. We need to evaluate these things. And we need to ask ourselves, is it helping us make disciples? If it is, great. Let's figure that out. Okay, it's not helping us make disciples. Okay, can it help us make disciples? Well, no, not really. Okay, then we either need to find a way to make disciples, or we need to remove it because it's not helping us further the mission and cause of Christ and His kingdom. And that's hard. That's hard. I go back to a time, I was 9 years old, and I had a pair of plaid pants that I absolutely adored. And I wore those at least 2 days a week to school. And I came home one day, and because I hadn't been trained to do my own laundry yet, and that was about this time after this story that I learned to do my own laundry. Because I came home, and over the weekend I was getting ready for Monday morning, and I was looking for my plaid pants. I could not find these pants. And I go to Mom and go, Mom, I'm looking for these pants. She said, why? I said, because they're my favorite pants, and I want to wear these to school on Monday. She looked at me and she said, Aaron, those stopped fitting you last year. And I'm like, that's not your decision to make. These are my favorite pants. And I'm like, what did you do with them? Oh, I gave them to Goodwill. Now, a couple things here. One, those are my favorite pants. Two, look at the entitlement I was already living. That we all tend to live. They're mine, I want them, why did you do this? See, we fall into these situations. The pants are not a big deal. Being clothed going to school is a big deal, which some have trouble with today. But the fact that I didn't have them, it was really tearing me up. And, to hear, well, they don't fit you anymore, I'm like, okay, that's just because they're up here doesn't mean that they don't fit me anymore. Come on, Mom. It's the new style, don't you know? That's right. So it's tough sometimes to give up something that you love, that you like, that you're used to. That pair of shoes that finally have formed themselves to your feet, and you love them, and then they tear, they wear out. A good cobbler's hard to find these days. You got to go break in a new pair of shoes? Ugh. Who wants to do that? So sometimes we get that way in a lot of other places in our life. We get used to things a certain way. We like things a certain way. It has formed itself to me, and I love it. But what happens when it doesn't function anymore like it did, or they don't fit anymore? What do? Well, you go searching for a new pair of plaid pants. That's what you do. Only to find nobody's making those anymore. Come on. They're making them now, and heaven forbid I'm not wearing them now. Plaid in my shirt's about as far as I'm going. I'm just saying. But we have to be willing to understand that there are important things we have to grasp and hold tight to those things. And some things are not as important as those things. They're important. We feel deeply about them. But coming together as many realizes that we all have a variety of viewpoints. Let's figure out a way to move together on the primary issues and find ways to reach people with the gospel of Jesus Christ, making disciples as we go, because that's the Great Commission. And as we do that, we're going to find a lot of solidarity in that. And we're going to find the joy of God and the move of God in our heart as we move in that way and we go in that way. So down here As we approach, we're over in Romans chapter 15. The Bible's going to teach us today that we need to be removing the labels that we hand out to people and that we have given to one another. And we need to realize that we need to love one another in Christ. And so as we get to this passage, this is chapter 14 and 15. There's some instructional words that Paul is giving to them. Over in chapter 14, he's going to talk about don't argue over disputed matters. And what does that mean? Well, the things that are in the gray section of life are not necessarily worth arguing about. There's black and there's white. Anybody that's reading the reading plan that you've been going through Leviticus, there's some black and white things, But we also have some areas of gray where there's developmental issues and there's movement and there's grace and there's space on some of the gray issues of things. Sometimes things that even denominationally, we separate ourselves in denominations over some things that are important to that group, but not necessarily a black and white issue. I mean, our Seventh-day Adventist brethren met yesterday, we meet today. It's not worth fighting over. Whether or not Church of Christ uses musical instruments and they don't use them and we do, not worth fighting over. I may not understand it, but it doesn't mean it's worth fighting over. Now, if we want to get into issues of baptism is required for you to be saved, that to me is a more black and white issue. It's like the Bible's clear. It is a response, not a deal. And yet still, we don't have to fight over some of those things. Now, if you want to talk about the virgin birth, we're going to go to toe to toe on that deal. If you want to talk about did Jesus die a real death, we're going to go on that one. Well, he didn't really die, so he wasn't really buried. No, yeah, he did. No, Jesus isn't really God. Okay, these are things. These are black and white things. But there are some great things that we don't all agree on. And even as Baptists over the century, we haven't always agreed on every little thing. And there was a time where that was okay. And today it's not as okay. But we need to remind ourselves of the grace given to us in the gray and realize that there's some space there to walk with people and to love people and to work with one another despite some of the gray issues that may not be as clear as we once thought. So he said, don't argue over disputed matters. The second half of 14 deals with, don't be judging one another over some of these things. And then we get to this third part. This is where we're going to focus in on today. Chapter 15, the first 3 verses. Now, we who are strong have an obligation to bear the weaknesses of those without strength and not to please ourselves. Now, that's a packed verse right there. There's a lot there. He goes on, each one of us is to please his neighbor for his good to build him up. For even Christ didn't please himself. On the contrary, as it's written, the insults of those who insult you have fallen on me. For whatever was written in the past was written for our instruction, so that we may have hope through endurance and through the encouragement from the Scriptures. Now, may the God who gives endurance and encouragement grant to you to live in harmony with one another according to Jesus Christ. Now, this is coming on the heels of all of the theology in the first 11 chapters. Then the practical section that started in chapter 12, as he talked about renewing of our mind and being transformed by that, and to love one another and realize we all have different gifts and abilities, and we come together with the analogy of the body, and we work together in concert together to accomplish the task that we've been given. And we as a church are the same thing. But the church, even at Rome, had some issues of division. They had some things they had to work out, and Paul was there to help them work it out. And the reality is, anytime a group comes together, there are going to be those differences. And we can focus on those instead of the similarities and just raise the problem further. But here Paul is saying, look, and I love what he's saying here. Now, we who are strong have an obligation to bear. Now, there are some who say that he's talking about himself, but Paul's a smart guy. And we've all used this term from time to time, now we don't do that here. or as a parent. No, we don't do that. We don't do that. Now, the problem comes when little Johnny says, yeah, but I saw you do that yesterday. Well, that's when confession comes and honesty hits. But the reality is that it's easy to focus on these kinds of things. And Rome was divided over some things. And I love that Paul is saying, now, the ones that are strong have an obligation. And catch this is great. There were basically, the division was Jew and Gentile. The ones who'd been there and the newcomers. The ones who had done things all these years, could trace it all the way back to Abraham, and we've got our history versus the Gentiles who were coming in, and they were still struggling with this. They were still having a problem. Even though Paul and Peter and Barnabas and all these others had been teaching and training, and you go back and look at Acts 15 as they were dealing with some of this, Rome is dealing with this stuff. And Rome is saying, I don't know how to grasp this. We're so radically different. And it didn't help that there were some people that were coming behind the scenes, whispering in ears and talking about different, but are we really like them? Are we really going to allow that in? Are we really going to make any adjustments for them or what? And so we had this going on. They called them the Judaizers. And they had this problem going on. And Paul, now the ones that are strong, well, who's he talking about? Now, the Jew's going to say, oh, he's talking about us. Yeah, we're the strong ones. We've been here. We've been here longer. We have all the traditions. We've done it all the right. Jesus was a Jew, not a Gentile. So, he's talking about us. Those Gentiles, those are the weak ones. But the way he words this and phrases this, to the Gentile listener, they could say, oh, no, we're the strong ones. Y'all crucified Jesus. We're the strong ones. We've come to faith, and the gospel has come to us because God loves us. We're the strong ones. You're the weak ones. We don't have all the history and tradition, so we don't have to have that baggage. And y'all are so bogged down in your baggage, we can't do anything. You see how division can rise so quickly? It's so easy to do. And when we look at 5 different generations that worship together today, and each one having its own thoughts and values and dreams and things, even if we agree on the primary, it's easy to divide out on the things that are not as critically important. It's easy for each of us to think, well, I'm the strong one, you're the weak one. It's easy to do that. And Paul is saying, stop doing that. Because the ones that are strong have an obligation. Wow. Obligation. You have a requirement to the weak. And because of the way Paul words this, he's talking to the whole church. He's talking to all of us. If you think you're the strong one, you have an obligation. That's whoever thinks they're the strong one. They have an obligation toward the weaker brother. To not please themselves. What's he saying? To bear the weaknesses of those without strength. To take them on, to bear them up, to burden themselves with it. To sustain them, to help them. And Paul will keep this language up as he goes through this passage. And to not please ourselves. But each one of us is to please his neighbor for his good, to build him up. Divisions over things that are not the primary things cause us to drift away from the mission that God's given us to do. And it wastes the precious time that we have. I mean, Marilyn and I were talking before service about the Ukrainian issue and deal, and I said, we have to really, maybe it's the end times. She asked, I said, yeah, it may be. And it could be. We could be in the end times. Yeah, we could be. We may not be. We could be. Here's the thing. Here's what Jesus has called every one of us to do. Live today like it's your last. Well, that's a paranoid way to live. No, it's reality. Because whether we get invaded or whether Jesus comes back or you get in a car wreck on the way home or you get shot in the head by a drive-by, live today like it's your last. What would you, if you knew that you would not make it till breakfast tomorrow, how would your life be different today? For Jesus. Hey, that hits all of us. Because most of us, me included, we don't all live like that, do we? It's someday. Oh, yeah, I believe it. It's happening. It's going to come. But it could be. Maybe this is it. I mean, you look at the world situation. Russia's going into Ukraine. I'm sure Poland's right behind. And everybody else in the East is watching this. China wants to know what to do with Taiwan, depending on how we react. And North Korea is just itching to invade something. And here we sit over here and you know, we got it great. We have it wonderful. Don't we do? But it doesn't mean it'll always be that way. So we have to live today as if it's our last. And not bicker over things that don't matter. And not to divide out over things that aren't critically important. This is what Paul's getting at. Because they lived, because they expected Jesus to return. We've got almost 2,000 years of history since he left, and we're sitting here going, really? He hadn't come yet? Well, the flip side of that philosophy is he hasn't come yet, but he promised he would. Isn't every day statistically increasing the probability that today's the day? Statistically speaking. Every day that he waits increases the probability that he's coming that day. Don't buy into the negative that says, well, he hasn't, so he's not. He's coming. Are you ready? And as long as churches, big C churches down to little C church in Crowley, as long as we as Christians divide over things that don't make a difference really in the long state of things, we are doing the devil's work. Because it moves our focus away from the gospel and making disciples to making sure I get what I want and my burger the way I want it in church. And that's not the call and the claim of Christ in our lives. Take up your cross and follow me, he says. Paul restates it and said, okay, you think you're the strong one. You have an obligation to the weak to please your neighbor, not yourself. So we all have to come to a moment of prayer before God and ask, God, am I seeking my own preferences here? Or are we seeking what your word has instructed for us to do? Are we wanting it our way? Or how can I please my neighbor? Imagine a world, imagine a church, imagine a service where we come together and everybody present is seeking the best of the next person beside them. What if we all gathered together and said, you know what? It's not about me, it's about you. And I want to make sure that you are grown up and built up and encouraged and enhanced and developed, and you take the next step in your spiritual journey. What if we did that? Imagine a place where that happens, because that's the church God intended for us to be. Rome wasn't doing it. We're going to find out next week Corinth wasn't doing it. Paul had strong words for them because Paul got it. Paul understood what was supposed to be happening. And so he says we have an obligation to not please ourselves. Each one of us is to please his neighbor for his good. So we have to set aside our tendencies toward criticism and towards judgment, and we have to have this understanding to set this stuff aside and act in the other person's best interest. Far beyond the wisdom of a 9-year-old, my mom did have my best interest in mind. I didn't see it. I didn't understand it. I didn't like it. And I gave her the silent treatment for about 6 hours. Just to prove my point. But she did have my best in mind, even if I couldn't see it at the time. And isn't that just like humanity? We don't always see it because we're so accustomed to one thing. We're so used to one thing. I mean, my goodness. Rome hadn't even been in existence 30 years. They were already into this. We've been in existence 130 years. We probably got some stuff to deal with. It's okay, but we got to deal with it. Because we can't move back. We have to live today and see what God wants us to do tomorrow. So we've got to have the mentality that says, I want to make sure that my neighbor sees Jesus. And I want to make sure that I'm giving all the opportunities available for the generation who's coming behind me to see Jesus, to grow up in Jesus, and to follow Jesus. That's ultimately what's happening here. And so this is what Paul wants us to do. He wants us to do these things and set aside these things, to please the other first. And he gives the model of Jesus. And he said, for even Christ didn't please himself. You go to Philippians 2 and you read about what Jesus did, how Paul wrote to the Philippians about the attitude and the mind of Christ, who even though he was equal with God, didn't consider himself equal with God. And he did what the Father asked of him to do. Just imagine. Just imagine. Your existence is in heaven. And the Father says, it's time to go to earth. I won't do that. I mean, look around. Why do I want to be here when I have heaven? Now, I'm not saying that was the attitude of Jesus, because Paul said the attitude was, yes, Father, I will do what you want me to do. What I'm saying is we in our humanity who are supposed to be following Christ and letting Christ shine in and through us don't always take that mentality. We take the other one. Yeah, I don't want to. I like what I have. I like what I got. I like where I am. I don't want to. But what if God says we should? Well, God's wrong. Yeah, you should respond that way. And yet in our hearts, because we know better than to say it, that's what we think sometimes. Because we've bought into this Eastern philosophy that God is so far away, he doesn't care about us. We've bought into this pagan mysticism that said God spun it into existence, but he doesn't care today. My friends, I'm here to tell you by the Word of God, he cares about every hair on the top of your head. He's counted them. If a sparrow falls, he's aware. If a hair falls out, he reduces it by one. And he knows how many gray and how many black, and he knows if you've colored your hair. I'll just leave that there. So what do we do with this? We have to begin to understand that we as Crowley, we as First Baptist Crowley, have to come together under the vision and mission that we have been called to do by the Word of God. And the vision that we are supposed to have as a church is that all the residents of Crowley would become disciple makers. Oh, preacher, why are you talking pie in the sky stuff again? Not everybody. I know my neighbor. He's not going to come to Jesus. But isn't that the call? Isn't that the prayer? That all the residents of Crowley would become disciple makers, not just converts, but followers of Christ and a disciple maker. This is the call. This is the challenge. This is the vision. It's not just to see if we can pack a pew, but can we pack heaven? That's the call. To get our eyes up and off of ourselves and onto a higher call and a higher vision that says God wants to see all of our neighbors come to a disciple-making opportunity in their life. To follow after Jesus. This is the call that we have. And how are we going to do that? By loving people so they move forward on life's journey. They may be uninterested, and you know it, but can you, by the way you live for Jesus, maybe move the needle a little? They're not as uninterested as they were. Or maybe they start asking good questions that you don't have answers to. It's okay. Maybe they get interested and you love them. You love them. You serve them so that they have an opportunity to hear and respond to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And in your bulletins, we have our commitments that we want to make. And they're listed there every week. And I hope that you'll review those and take those. I've cut them out and put them in my Bible. And I'm going to start keeping it as a bookmark to remind me what our commitments are. That we would accept, that we provide a welcoming, non-judgmental, and safe space where you can take steps of spiritual growth. Isn't that a church you want to be a part of? Yes, but we have to make the commitments to do these things. To recognize we find the good in people and love to share it with others. The opposite of that is called gossip, where we find the bad in people and want to make sure somebody else knows about it, otherwise known as Facebook. We inspire, we motivate to mobilize people to fulfill their God-given potential, not the one I put on them, but the one God's already given them. To serve them, to engage our church and community by service projects and providing help when possible, sharing community resources, evangelism. We want to build real, trusting relationships in order to share the gospel of Jesus Christ that leads to life transformation. Not hell insurance. Life change, which is a following Jesus. It's a lifelong process, right? Theologically, we talk about having been justified. That's the moment of your faith decision in Jesus Christ, and all of your sins are gone. And then there's this thing called sanctification. And all that means is I every day try to be more like Jesus today than I was yesterday. And I'm doing what I have to do to make that a reality in my day today. So that someday, the third step of that in the big theology word is glorification, that I'm going to go be with Jesus someday. And when that day arrives and when it's all said and done, we all get a new body. Praise Jesus. We all get a new body. Where the BMI is 0. Hey, let a man dream. So how do we do that? How do we step back? How do we remove some labels that we put on people? How do we remove that and step back and get involved? First of all, we have to look at people, we have to look at them as people and not projects to fix. That hurting soul that you know is not a project for you to fix to make you feel better. They are a person in need of God's move in their life and heart. We have to see people, not them as a project. We have to be concerned about people more than a program. Because sometimes programs become non-functional. Sometimes programs become unworkable. Sometimes programs aren't doing what they're supposed to do. But there's people. What do we do with people? How do we serve people? How do we help people move forward in life's journey? Does this program work? Well, no, it doesn't work, but we've been doing it for 100 years. If it doesn't work, either fix it or trash it, because we have a person right here in need of knowing Jesus, following Jesus, how to follow Jesus, and that doesn't work. So what do we need to do to make it work? Where's my Christian engineers and creations? And creators, I need you. I need you. I need you. Why? Because we have to find ways to help people move forward and not just have all the machinations of church, but see people's lives change. This is the call of God. And we do it as many because there's all kinds of ways and all kinds of you that we all come together and we see how do we make this work? So that 10 years from now, there's still a church on this corner reaching this community, making all the residents of Crowley disciple makers. Because the alternative isn't very nice. So we have to see people. Walk a mile in their shoes. That's that old statement, isn't it? What does that mean? Listen to them. Listen to them. If you're young, listen to those older than you. If you're old, listen to those younger than you. But listen to them. Walk a mile in their shoes. Learn from them. It's all sides of this. Learn from them. We all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. And the millennials don't know everything they think they know, and the elders and the boomers have so much wisdom that we need to share, but they still don't understand some things because none of us understand it all. So we work together, and we learn together, and we love one another. We help one another. Why? Because the strong have an obligation to bear up the weak. Well, who's the strong? Who's the weak? Isn't that a good question? How about let's focus on encouraging and enhancing everybody around us to see, feel, experience, and follow Jesus better today than yesterday. Let's do that and watch God work. This is the call. This is the call. To lay down our labels, to lay down our issues of division that humanity brings up, and say from this point forward, it's about Jesus, like it should have always been. And in my mind it is, but sometimes in my practice and in my heart, it isn't always like that. Will you do that? That's the question. That's the question in this moment of response and reflection.